Good morning everyone. This is lecture 7 in its first part, and today I will talk about dimensions. And dimensions are one of the most important commands. It's actually a set of commands you can find in the annotation tab here. And they are basically important to give more detail and information about how you draw and how you specify the building, especially the distance between axes or between object or between faces. You can use it to specify radiuses or diameter for objects and several other aspects and characteristics of everything you find inside the building. So first, before we go, it's a good idea to start up the layer command. And I'll create a new layer, and here I will call it dimensions, and don't forget to make it current and give a specific color for it. And it would be great if you can specify a type of a line weight to it. A type of line weight here. Let's say 15. Anything then less than the default, which is 25, would be good. And now the basic and the most important one is to use the dimension linear. And of course here I'm using the previous file that I used in lecture 6 in my second quiz that I solved in the previous lectures. The DLI, the dimension, and then LI linear. That's basically the most used dimension command. Of course, what I'm going to explain, there is several other methods and there are several commands that I'm going to skip in this lecture, but I'm giving for you here the set of commands that I usually or personally use in my daily life, and I think that they might be useful for you. The DLI, before I go and explain the dimension linear, remember that all of the commands that I'm going to give you today start up with the letter D, and that stands of course for dimension, and the second two letters start up for the first two letters actually from the type of dimension that we do. So the D is for dimension, and then the LI, as you can see, is for linear. And if you hit space, one space, in this case AutoCAD is actually waiting for the first point for the dimension. So I can go ahead and zoom in here and pick up this point, the quadrant, as the first point, and then AutoCAD actually asks for the second point. And now you click and you move your hand. That's the upside or downside to specify where you want to place that, and then you click to finalize that. If you happen and have this situation, which is great because it's happened where there is no text and the size of the dimension is really small, in this case we might need to use another command, which is probably going to use it once to fix this style or the dimension style, which is D. Only D or dimension style, and then you hit space. I can go ahead and hit modify here, and then go to fit, because you can go to text and increase the size of the text, but that will increase only the text itself, not the overall features or parts or the other parts of the dimension. So fit, and then the overall scale, so you can multiply the overall dimension with all its features by that amount. So now if it's 1, I'll just go ahead and use 10 and hit OK and then close. And I'll start noticing now that the size is actually big. It's actually bigger, but not that big enough that could be useful and readable. So again, D space, and then modify, and then fit, and then instead of 10, I will go 50 and hit OK. Now things are much more better. You can go ahead and make it bigger if you like. Yeah, probably. So I'll hit space to repeat the last command. And again, the same thing, probably 100 would be a good idea. So that's good. So what I've done is DLI again, space, now the first point, and then the second point, and then I move my hand, and this time I will specify the end here, so they are actually creating, like a continuous series or a chain of dimension. DLI, and again, I can get from the end of that to the end of that, and then click again on the same point to avoid, the specifying the distance from those points. So that's actually physically start up from this point with ending up this point, instead of having this, which is, from this point to this point. So you can see the difference between the extension lines that you can see in here. So whatever you think might suitable for you. So that's the basic thing. That's the basic method to deal with the DLI or dimension linear. Dimension linear or DLI have another way to deal with, which is after you write DLI, you hit space twice, and that will change, this mouse, the indicator or the cursor of the mouse to the square, small square. That means it isn't actually waiting for a point, and if you read what the dynamic input's telling you, it's to ask you to select an object to give the dimension to it. And in this case, if you select that line, the entire line has been given, an entire dimension for the entire line is given once instead of specifying two points. You might find this method useful, again, to describe the overall, dimension for the boundary, or for the edges, or for any object you think that it is a continuous object, and then you can, instead of giving yourself the headache of adding 2 points, you can just one click and select the object. And now, whereas you actually be careful not to have two lines above each other, and by accident selecting the incorrect one, and that will provide the unrequired dimension for you. Anyway, now in the dimension or in the dimension process, sometimes you will need to provide an entire string or entire set or chain of dimension. And in this case, it would be highly recommended not to make them on a different level. That's a kind of ugly thing to be done in drawing the set of, architectural dimension, or the working drawing you do. That's a crazy, incorrect way of expressing your, expressing your detail or dimension. So you should, create a string or a continuous set of dimension, and that can be done by using first DLI, like this, and I'll start to specify this is my first point, this is my second point, and again, as I said, I specify the distance or the way from the original point that I click. And remember that DLI is like a vector object that you started from this point and you ended this point, though, so the vector actually going downward. That's the start, that's the end, so it goes that way. So if I hit now DCO, and as the name can goes, D for dimension and CO for continuous, and you hit space, it will continue from the second point and allow you just to click, that's really fast way, instead of repeating the dimension linear several times and getting annoyed by how to fix it to the end. But instead it will create a set of a set or a chain of a dimension. That's really useful. And again, you need to go DLI, specify the start, specify the end, and by that end, that means we're going that way, so DCR, and then click here and click here. So one of the famous mistakes you can do with the DLI and DCO technique is you specify the incorrect, sequence of point. So some student, for example, start up from this point and ending up by this point, and ignoring that the DLI is now starting from here, ending up this way. So the DCO should goes that way, or starting from this point. So if you hit DCO, it's okay if you want to go that way, but usually they're gonna go up, and that's, giving them all, all the set correct except this guy, you see, this guy, which actually started from this point. So don't fall in this trap and don't make this mistake. It's a very famous mistake. I know you can fix it that way, see, by dragging this, or probably dragging that too, but might be really long, steps, extra steps, unnecessary extra step to fix this. So that's almost it about dimension linear and dimension continuous. And again, as I said, you can select it, and you can drag that, to move that later on. Drag one leg, it's okay. Drag two legs, it's also okay. And you can even, manipulate the location of the text. And if you push it away from the line, a leader will show up, or you go down, you push it here like this, whatever you think it's suitable for you, especially if it's distance, if it's a short distance like in here. So you can, just avoid the gap, the text become above the walls and the center line here. So you just stretch it or just get it away from the wall, and that might be useful for you to have this line or leader to get it away from, the tidy area, or especially when it will be crowded and have too much dimension in a short space. So that's DLI. Again, that's DCO and D. So getting ourselves back to dimension style, if I go back to D and we go to modify, and yes, you can have a different set of characteristics change individually, like you change the text and you go here, for example, that's the style, that's the height of the text. You can make the text only bigger and smaller. That you can go for the text color, and I highly advise you not to change that, because it should be, the color of that text should be following the color provided by layer, not to override it here. Align with the dimension, or force it to be horizontal in all the cases. That's might be a useful thing to look at. Symbol and arrows, probably that will be good, especially if you use this architectural text to substitute those arrows with those 45 angles. Some people using those dots, instead of that. Depend on what the office or what you actually like. Again, that's for extensions, how far that goes and how far the extension on the both sides can be, controlled in a way. I'm gonna hit cancel, and I'm gonna accept the default actual values that provided for me here in the dimension style. So that's a DLI, and again, we can go ahead and use that to specify the final thing about it. If I pick 2 points, they are not aligned or not located on the same axis. So usually we measure from this point to this point. But what if happen if I click this and this point? Now you see when I move my hand vertically, it measures this dimension for me as a 200. When I move it to the to the horizontal projection, that will be like a 200 mil measurement for it. So that might be useful for you, to specify the projection of those 2 points on one surface. So what if you need to measure the actual, that dimension or the distance from this point to this point? In this case, dimension linear will not be your friend. And imagine in this case having a very basic inclined line that, need to turn off the F8 and maybe that line. So if you use DLI and you hit this point and this point, again, it's going to give you the horizontal or the vertical projection of it. And in this case, you need to use DAL, which is dimension aligned instead of dimension linear. So the first D is for dimension and the AL for, aligned. And again, if I select this first point and this second point, so AutoCAD will give me the actual length aligned to that line, which is what you need in this case. And be careful when you want to change the location of that. So grabbing this will be similar to what we have in DLI, but changing this will give us a really unrequired results. So be careful when you change those 2 grips in here, and it's not really similar to what you do in here. Here in the linear, it will not change. You see the measurement if you kept it the same way or the same distance. Of course, if you go that way, you're gonna mess things up. But in here, if you go to the midpoint, it gives you something totally different. And don't forget, DAL also work on the same way that DLI works. So if you hit double space, it allows you to select the object instead of picking 2 points. So keep that in mind. Now other types, let's say DAN, which is again D for dimension and the AN for angular, and that allows you to pick 2 lines and AutoCAD will give you the actual angle between them. So that might be useful. Again, it's a DAN and space. So select those 2 lines and that's it. That's what we want to know, the angle between the object. Other command is DRA, which is dimension radius. So D for dimension, RA for radius, and then you select the the arc, and it's gonna give you like the possibility to place it inside or outside with a different technique in the presentation. So if you place it inside, you can just move your hand to specify where you want it, and that might be useful like that, with a little of a dot here to be shown. If I had space to repeat that guy, and if I place it outside, it's gonna draw the radius for me, and I can place it that way. That might be useful for you if you want to know or to see the radius itself and the center or the end of the point for that arc where it's been actually placed, in order to specify it itself. To say that this radius is a 2 by 2 or 2.2 from this wall, and 2.2 meter away from that point. That might be useful for you, depending on what type of detailing you're going to provide for your construction. Again, DDI, now dimension diameter, and the names describe. The first D giving you the dimension, and the DI is for diameter. So when you hit the space and select the same arc, now if you put it inside that, you're going to get this to tell you that the radius, the overall diameter is 6,000, and if you place it outside, then it's going to show you the overall diameter. Probably here it's not really clear, so if you have a circle, DRA, see, when you place it outside, that's the radius, and DDI, it's going to draw the diameter, the overall diameter for you. So if that's what you want, it's okay. If it's not, you just place it inside, and be careful that there is no R here. This is another symbol, that's an R here to say the radius, and this guy here to tell you that this is the overall distance or diameter. So that's a couple of useful couple of set of dimension that you can get benefit from, and that's really, there is another sets of annotation that I didn't cover up in this lecture, but what I use actually, or the most used command that you will find that useful every day in everyday work and everyday process, is those set of commands. I wish that you find them useful. Thank you very much and have a good day. Bye bye.